Well, today we're going to get into everyone's favorite topic to talk about, the economy. Now, overall, as far as how the economy is doing right now, there's a lot of people arguing both sides. I think the economy is actually doing well right now. I do think that it's actually doing pretty good. Now, some people are saying that the credit should go to President Obama. Other people are saying the credit should go to President Trump. Overall, at the end of the day, I'm going to have to go with most of this is going to President Trump. Now, that being said, there was some recent debate between Cenk Uygur from TYT and Kayleigh McEnany from the RNC and part of Trump's 2020 campaign on CNN over economic policy. And of course, Cenk is basically predicting that we're heading for a recession pretty soon. A lot of people are saying that they expect that we're going to head toward a recession. Some are saying that this whole trade war issue with China is actually going to further escalate us into a recession even quicker. And there's a lot of people on the left who are hoping for a recession, such as Bill Maher, maybe. Well, I can say that without a doubt, to each and every one of you people who hope we have a recession, I hope that comes back to bite you in the butt one day. Seriously. Because, see, people that have a good bit of money, like you, Bill Maher, don't have to worry about things like recessions. People like me do. The people who are, not living in $200,000 plus homes exactly. Living in small towns, blue collar jobs. Yeah, got guys like me are impacted by those recessions, not you. So it's mighty nice of you to encourage one of those along. Because at the end of the day, who I really had as far as any kind of a decent choice to vote for in 2016 was Trump, who actually had somewhat of a agreeable economic policy. He actually bashed some of those lousy free trade deals. Or I could vote for Clinton, who would have most certainly been in favor of every single one of those bad free trade deals. Now, you can argue whether Trump's been for some of these deals or not. There are a lot of people are saying that the new trade agreement he's worked out with Canada and Mexico is basically NAFTA 2.0. Others are saying it's going to do much better for the country. There's arguments to be made on both sides there. Trump pulled us out of the TPP, and some people are saying he has slipped provisions that were in the TPP into this new agreement with Canada and Mexico. So, take your pick on which side of the aisle you want to stand on as far as Trump and his trade and economic policy has been concerned. But there's one thing for sure, Clinton would not have been any better. I really don't think there's any disputing that fact. Clinton would have been just as bad, if not worse. Okay? After all, it was Bill Clinton who signed NAFTA, and it was Hillary who called the TPP the gold standard of free trade deals. So that being said, yeah, thank you, Bill, for those wonderful wishes of a recession that would affect, blue-collar people, not you. So with that being said, there's a lot of people cheering on the recession. Now, is a recession going to happen? Maybe, maybe not. I hope not. And if what Trump is trying to do by making China come to the table and play fairly ends up causing some pain on the country, as I said the other day, at the end of the day, something's going to have to be done. We can't just keep sitting on our hands out of fear of some sort of economic blowback while we just keep letting China stick it to us, in all these different ways. Something's got to be done, and it goes beyond China. All these other countries who we have lopsided trade deals with, something's going to have to be done, okay? But in the meantime, I want to examine two economic theories, more or less, that people try to, base a lot of their strategies off of on how to run the country. So obviously you've got what we hear a lot of from Republicans and such. You've heard trickle down. Another term kind of associated with it is supply side economics. So let's just take one moment to examine what exactly supply side economics is. Alright, so what we've got here, nice little description of what supply side economics is. The term supply side economics is used in two different but related ways. Some use the term to refer to the fact that production, supply, underlies consumption and living standards. In the long run, our income levels reflect our ability to produce goods and services that people value. Higher income levels and living standards cannot be achieved without expansion in output. Virtually all economists accept this proposition and therefore are supply-siders. Okay? Supply-side economics is also used to describe how changes in marginal tax rates influence economy activity. Supply-side economists believe that high marginal tax rates strongly discourage income, output, and the efficiency of resource use. In recent years, this latter use of the term has become more common of the two and is thus the focus of this article. Okay, so keep that in mind. Basically, the trickle-down economic theory is what we're going to be talking about here. Okay, the marginal tax rate is crucial because it affects the incentive to earn. The marginal tax rate reveals how much of one's additional income must be turned over to the tax collector as well as how much is retained by the individual. For example, when the marginal tax rate is 40%, 40 of every $100 of additional earnings must be paid in taxes, and the individual is permitted to keep only $60 of his or her additional income. As marginal tax rates increase, people get to keep less of what they earn. An increase in marginal tax rates adversely affects the output of an economy in two ways. First, higher marginal tax rates reduce the payoff people derive from work and from other taxable productive activities. When people are prohibited from reaping much of what they sow, they will sow more sparingly. Thus, when marginal tax rates rise, some people, those with working spouses for example, will opt out of the labor force. Others will decide to take more vacation time, retire earlier, or forego overtime opportunities. Still, others will decide to forego promising but risky business opportunities. In some cases, high tax rates will even drive highly productive citizens to other countries where taxes are lower. These adjustments, and others like them, will shrink the effective supply of resources and therefore will shrink output. Second, high marginal tax rates encourage tax shelter investments and other forms of tax avoidance. This is inefficient. If, for example, a $1 item is tax deductible and the individual has a marginal tax rate of 40%, he will buy the item if it is worth more than 60 cents to him because the true cost to him is only 60 cents. Yet the $1 price reflects the value of the resources given up to produce the item. High marginal tax rates, therefore, cause an item with a cost of $1 to be used by someone who values it less than $1. Taxpayers facing high marginal tax rates will spend on pleasurable, tax-deductible items such as plush offices, professional conferences held in favorite vacation spots, and various fringe benefits. Such as like a company automobile, business entertainment, and a company retirement plan. Real output is less than its potential because resources are wasted producing goods that are valued less than their cost of production. Critics of supply-side economics point out that most estimates of the elasticity of labor supply indicate that a 10% change in after-tax wages increases the quantity of labor supplied by only 1 or 2%. This suggests that changes in tax rates would only exert a small effect of labor output. However, these estimates are of short-run adjustments. One way to check the long-run elasticity of labor is to compare countries such as France that have had high marginal tax rates on even middle-income people for a long time with countries such as the United States where the marginal tax rates have been persistently lower. Recent work by Edward Prescott of the 2004 Nobel Prize in Economics used difference in marginal tax rate between France and the United States to make such a comparison. Prescott found that the elasticity of long-run labor supply was substantially greater than in the short-run supply, and that differences in tax rates between France and the United States explain nearly all of the 30% shortfall of labor inputs in France compared with the United States, he concluded. So basically, what this is kind of saying, and people can argue this, we're going to get to other economic theories in just a moment here, is that in the long run, you do have to give incentives to the people who have the money and who have the wherewithal and the resources to start business to want to start business. You have to encourage the entrepreneurship, which is true. You're going to have to give them some sort of an incentive. And so the people who say that we shouldn't cut their taxes, that they should be paying more taxes to pay their fair share to fund this or to fund that, while I can agree with that up to a point, you're going to have to keep jobs. And unfortunately, people like me don't have the resources to go start a nice company. That is just one of those cold, hard facts of life. That's one that doesn't make me lose any sleep at night. I believe I was put on this planet for a reason, and that reason may not have been to run a big business, but nonetheless, I live my life one day at a time. Okay, so I'm not upset about that fact. But nonetheless, you do need people out there with the resources to do it. And if they've got the resources, that means they probably have the resources to, especially now, mom and pop shops aside. Mom and pop shops are not in what we're talking about here. We're talking about big, corporations. And while we've had our say on this channel about corporations, I've made it very clear how I feel about the lobbying, corruptions, bribery in the campaigns, all this crap, and how corporations tie in with it. They're, and some corporations, when they making their profits, every corporation's goal is to make profits. Some go about it better ways than others. Some do it at the expense of screwing whoever they need to make another buck. Okay, outsourcing jobs, and then you've got other corporations who just do all kinds of ridiculous crap to make their money, such as big pharma, for example. Okay. With that being said, let's say I want to start a manufacturing plant somewhere. If I've got options, I don't have to do it here. I don't, and then of course each state has incentives that they throw in there as well. Now, while I do agree with that point to some degree, okay, while I agree with that, at the same time, I'm also going to give credit to the counter argument, and that is that while the Republicans want to push the issue here that we have to give these tax breaks and we have to give more money back to the rich, basically, so that they can go out and create jobs and give you a better pay raise, provide you better benefits, X, Y, and Z. The problem with that is some do, some don't. Some do exactly what the critics say and put that money right back in their own pocket. Okay? They buy stock back. Okay? They do things to try to increase stock value for their company. But they don't reinvest it back into their workers. They're looking at it from the standpoint of, well, we already got our workers. Man, we've been paying them this much. What? Oh, you thought you were going to get more money from us? No, no. Nice try. Now go back to work. That's what you get a lot of the time. Okay? So they're 100% correct. Now, that being said, we've got two sides here. Before we go any further with supply side, let's take a look at another economic theory. Okay, so this is demand side economics. Also, some people know it as Keynesian economics. Okay, so let's look at what we've got here. Because Keynesian economists believe the primary factor driving economic activity and short-term fluctuations is the demand for goods and services, the theory is sometimes called demand-side economics. This perspective is at odds with classical economic theory or supply-side economics, which states that production of goods or services or supply is of primary importance in economic growth. Economist John Maynard Keynes, or Keynes or something, obviously it's where Keynesian economics comes from. Probably just butchered his name, but developed his economic theories in large part as a response to the Great Depression of the 1930s. Before the Great Depression, classical economics was the dominant theory, with the belief that through the market forces of supply and demand, economic equilibrium would be restored naturally over time. However, the Great Depression and its long-running widespread unemployment defied classical economic theories, which would not explain the mechanisms of the free market were not restoring balance to the economy. Okay? Insufficient demand causes unemployment. Okay? Keynes maintained that unemployment is the result of inadequate demand for goods. During the Great Depression, factories sat idle and workers were unemployed because there was not enough of a demand for those products. In turn, factories had sufficient demand for workers because of this lack of aggregate demand. Unemployment persisted, and contrary to classical theories of economics, the market was not able to self-correct and restore balance. One of the core characteristics of Keynesian or demand-side economics is the emphasis on aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is composed of four elements: consumption of goods and services, investment by industry in capital goods, government spending on public goods and services, and net exports. Under the demand-side model, Keynes advocated for government intervention to help overcome low aggregate demand in short term, such as during a recession or depression, to reduce unemployment and stimulate growth. How the government can generate demand. In other components of aggregate demand are static, government spending can mitigate these issues. If people are less able or willing to consume, and businesses are less willing to invest in building more factories, the government can step in to generate demand for goods and services. It can achieve this goal through its control of the money supply by altering interest rates or selling or buying government-issued bonds. Keynesian economics supports heavy government spending during a national recession to encourage economic activity. Putting more money in the pockets of the middle and lower class has a greater benefit to the economy than saving or stockpiling the money in a wealthy person's account. Increasing the flow of money to lower and middle classes increases the velocity of money or frequency at which $1 is used to buy domestically produced goods and services. Increased velocity of money means more people are consuming goods and services and thus contributing to an increase in aggregate demand. Now, you may have listened to that and said, well, wait a minute. That sounds a whole lot better than the other one. And in all honesty, I'm inclined to agree with you. Okay? While I do find some facts of classical economic theory to be true, and I think we still need in an economic policy, the Keynesian economic theory saying that we need to get more money back to lower middle class, especially during, crisis times, I do believe is more effective. Okay? Now, I know exactly what people are going to jump to try and argue me on this. They're going to go back to what Obama did, stimulus packages, things like that. And they're going to say, well, it didn't work, this and that and the other thing. Okay, so let's examine that first, okay? One other president who really used that tactic was FDR. Now, I've heard Republicans try to come out and say, well, FDR and his programs didn't actually get us out of the Great Depression. If someone can show me the cold, hard, factual evidence of that, which I have not found yet, I've heard the arguments, and I've heard people try to make the argument, but at the end of the day, looks to me like he pulled us through it. Now, some people say other countries did it quicker and this and that, but, to me, you're getting into the weeds a lot there. I don't think you're getting too far out, and you're really stretching because other countries have different size economies, different size populations. Naturally, things should be able to work at a different pace as compared to this country. So I think you're kind of apples and oranges there in the first place. Okay? That being said, I'm going to give FDR the credit. Okay? Now, this is where I think you kind of need a happy balance. Again, I think you have to create the incentive for people to want to start the businesses in the first place. And if you don't have any sort of benefit to the people who have the money, then they're going to be less likely to start. I do believe that stands true just because people are all out for the money. If they don't think they're going to see a nice return of profit, or then they're a lot more hesitant to get involved. I think that's really just common sense. I'm sure there's a lot of liberals and the progressives and stuff who want to argue me on that, but as a blue collar guy, it makes perfect sense to me. Okay. On the other hand, it also makes perfect sense to me that those people are probably going to be more likely. You're not going to get every single one of them to reinvest that money by giving it back to them. Okay, and there's where the key difference comes in. Some are good enough people that they will truly invest that money properly. They will truly try to start things, okay, and start new businesses and reinvest back into their workers. While some will put it in the piggy bank and it goes nowhere. Okay. Ben Shapiro tried to make that point debating Cenk Uygur at Politicon one year. He said, well, hey, it does no good for some of these people to sit on their money. Oh, well, it depends on the industry. Of course, banks are going to have to reinvest that money, the banks, but the actual businesses themselves, stockpile it back from here to kingdom come. Are you kidding me? That's just more money for them. More money to expand their nice little office furniture and whatnot, okay? But Keynesian economics is kind of fighting back against that whole theory, and it's saying, look, it's best that money be, invested back into the people. And, because the people will go out and buy more things when they get that money, and buy the American goods and services. Now, hold up, because that's where we hit the serious snag right now, people. What was the key point there? It said that they would go out and buy the goods. But what did it say in particular? Key word here, okay? Domestically produced goods. You know what that means? Something that has a label on it that says made in the USA. And now we reach the dilemma that we're in today. Because that economic theory makes perfect sense. The people are reinvesting into the American-produced economy, American-produced goods. But that's all gone. There's not that much stuff you can go to the store and buy anymore that's made in America. The clothes you wear, the electronics, I mean, it's hard. There's stuff out there, but nothing like what it was back in FDR's day. Okay? And so that's the problem. And so if you're not reaping the benefit of Keynesian economics, really, which is investing back into the domestically produced goods, well, it would only stand to reason that that whole economic theory is going to fall flat on its ass because it doesn't have the legs to stand up. You're not getting the benefit from it. Sure, you're putting money back into the people's hands, but where's the money going then? They're buying Chinese products, Vietnamese products, Japanese products, South Korean products. Really? Taiwan, Mexico, Bangladesh, you name it. But it's not here. It's not here. So they're not reinvesting into those domestic products. Well, that kind of screws the whole thing up, doesn't it, people? Kind of can't work. And the only way you're going to try and get anything back, well, again, you're going to have to encourage more people to open up here. But then you run into the next problem, okay, and this is where demand side has it right. See, supply side, you can't just open business. You got to open a business that the people really have a use for, that consumers have a use for. I could open up, a coffee shop on the corner. But where would a coffee shop be best? On a corner where there's only, a few houses on my street, or in the middle of downtown where there's a lot of foot traffic? See, it's all about, what you have, the area. You've got to use good common sense. So you can't just make stupid products that no one wants, which was another big issue from the Great Depression. You have to make items that people want and need today. Okay? And one of the big industries is in the computer business. And as we discussed in another video recently about Trump versus, Xi Jinping, U.S. versus China, that industry, thanks to those lopsided trade deals, has went and left. Exit stage left, son. They went to China or somewhere else. There's still some here. But we've lost a ton of those jobs, as the Democrats like to say, the jobs of the future. We've lost them. They went to China. Paying fraction of the labor. And, of course, we can get into somebody else who's giving some business to China. A nice little right-winger who I've actually watched some of her stuff over the years. Had my agreements with her, but in this instance, I think she's kind of hypocritical, but we'll save that one for another day. Okay? But nonetheless, you've got to have products that people want. That was the issue back then. So that's where demand side has the product thing right, except a lot of those businesses that have gotten started left. And so therefore, that's where you have to have something from supply side economics that says you have to give something back to the investors and the people who are going to start this operation in the first place. You've got to find the happy medium. And so that's why when everyone's bashing the fact Trump is trying to, have this, war with China, basically, and by war I don't mean missiles and guns, I mean trade war, okay? People are looking at the effect right now as, oh, look what it's happening. The stock market's going down, blah, 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 blah. But if the end result is we get a better trade deal, it doesn't cost us as many jobs, we could actually possibly start making some stuff here. And then again, if we're able to produce goods at home, and then you apply a Keynesian economic theory, which gives the money back to average Americans, who then reinvest that money by buying American products, domestic products, which keeps that whole cycle going. You're investing back into the businesses to keep producing goods, and the government's helping me. You see, it's all one nice oiled machine. But when you take that key factor away, you cut the whole thing out at the knees. But to get that nice oiled machine operating in the first place, you've got to kickstart it with a little bit of supply side economics that are going to want the people to invest in the first place. See, like I said, people, this is the independent report. The right only wants to push the supply side. The left only wants to push the demand side. What no one wants to really say is that, in all honesty, you've got to have a combination of both. That's why I said on the minimum wage, you can't just hike the minimum wage up and not expect bad results when you do it across the board. Different states have different rates of living, different costs of living, different living standards. Okay? Things are different. $15 here, yeah, it does pretty good. $15 in New York, yeah, not so good. So what you'd have to do, instead of making a federal minimum wage, which now, when you say don't make a federal minimum wage, the Democrats would lose their mind, first and foremost. Republicans have been saying this for a while. While at face value it doesn't sound very appealing, you look at it like this. You're not doing away with the minimum wage. You could set it at just something across the board, but what you tell companies is, and this is where you could get some supply side in, you say, okay, if you invest and you do these things, and part of these things, you come up with some regulations that you would expect businesses, as far as environmental and the benefits and things like that, but you also say that the workers need to have good benefits, and that if you pay them a livable wage according to the state, and that's where the federal government should collaborate with the state governments and find out what each state deems a acceptable wage would be within that state, that someone could work that job and rent a small apartment or something and be able to survive. And whatever they come out to, the federal government could then offer tax, credit or tax breaks to companies by saying, okay, and state governments could do the same thing even to it. It would be more the better. Okay? You'd say to those companies, we're willing to offer you a nice big tax break, which would be worth your while. In return, you will do these things for your workers. Okay? If you try to outsource jobs to another country, you lose that tax credit. If you don't want to pay your workers what the state deems would be a livable wage, you lose that tax credit. And this is a nice tax credit, people, so you don't want to pass this opportunity up. So we then have incentivized the creation. And part of that deal we made when we incentivized it is that they reinvest a good chunk of money back into their workers so their workers are not struggling. Okay, now the reason that I also pitched that is because here's the other problem. Raising the minimum wage, some jobs out there are meant to be little starter jobs and not career jobs. I don't think that you really should be expecting to make a long-term career out of McDonald's. Do I think you should make dirt nothing at McDonald's? No. I mean, at the end of the day, no. You deserve to make decent money. But I feel like jobs like that are best served as starter jobs for people. So if they don't meet that requirement to receive that tax credit, then they're also not having to pay out $15 an hour to a worker either. If they want to hire them at $10, $11, $12 an hour, and of course they should be adjusting it as inflation changes, but nonetheless, whatever they do, it's kind of up to them. We're talking about manufacturing, producing the goods. We're talking about places like BMW. We're talking about warehouses that'll work you to death like Amazon. Talking about Adidas. We're talking about the Michelin plants. Okay? Ford plants. GM. Even though GM's basically closing up and going away, Ford's open plants in Mexico and so on and so forth as well. All these warehouse jobs, blue collar, hardworking, sweat on your brow jobs. Okay? Those are that's where this should really be, targeted, because that's where the middle class is today. That's the middle class. The middle class is what helped build this country once upon a time. We need to build the middle class back to take this country back to its best way possible. where we're doing the best overall. Okay, and it's not going to happen unless we really rebuild that middle class. All right. So for all the people who was attacking Trump, hoping he has a recession because he's trying to fight back against China and these bad trade deals, keep in mind, people, you're not getting the benefit of Keynesian economics, okay, because China has gotten a lot of our jobs and a lot of our products have another country's name on them, so you're not reinvesting into domestic goods. That crippled Keynesian economics right there. I showed you the definition of what the whole theory behind Keynesian economics is. You switch it over to supply side. Obviously, we've seen some of the good in the theory of supply side. You definitely can see where people want to pocket that money. So again, you have to have a mix. But in order to make the mix work, at the end of the day, it comes down to one thing and one thing only. And that is, you have to get the fair trade. You have to stop the manipulation from China. You're going to have to stop all this crap where we're losing jobs by the thousands, and important jobs, good paying jobs, and, as the Democrats like to say, the jobs of tomorrow. Until we fix that problem, and it's going to take a trade war, unfortunately, but until we get that problem solved, the two main economic theories, you're not going to get either one to work. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Independent Report. If you like the video, please give us a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Also, please subscribe to the channel as we're trying to grow this channel to reach more and more people every day. And if you subscribe, be sure that you ring that bell so that you stay up to date and get notifications when we release new content. Also, please support us in the link below with our Patreon. We're trying to make this channel grow. Funds will be used to grow the channel and to reach more people. We appreciate your support, and we hope you tune in next time.